Hey everyone, welcome back. I hope you guys enjoyed the interview with Mr. Nathaniel Gillis. He had some very interesting things to say, and I'd like to maybe expand on that a little bit more, but also go a bit deeper and tangent into other subjects that are still related, but you'll see. Okay, so you know I mentioned in the interview that what he's saying was actually very Gnostic, and he agreed with me, right? Because he said at one point that our thoughts and our emotions seem to be very affected and manipulated by these beings, right? He calls it a parasitic consciousness, and I would agree with him on that, because even if you just look up the parasitic phenomenon, the physical parasitic phenomenon, it does seem to take an effect on the host, right? Those parasites, whether they have their own thoughts or they act like receivers for these entities in the astrals, to then implant them with a consciousness, specific thoughts, creating specific emotions, creating imbalances in the body, creating a feedback loop, right? And we as the hosts, as the humans, may think those are our own, right? And this being reflected to us in the astrological, numerological characteristics, archetypes that we are born into. So we are born into a parasitic consciousness to begin with, right? The whole good and bad phenomenon warring inside our minds, which side we're gonna pick. So I definitely think he has a huge point in that. And in terms of describing the power of these archons, I think what Gnosticism in general maybe overdoes in terms of its victimization is that it attributes a lot of power to these archons, which, it's fair, right? For something to be able to create a version of yourself and pretend like it is you and make you think that it is you, right? With the whole ego phenomenon. Ego seems like a huge parasite, and we've described it on this channel as a chip, or its consciousness fused with the spirit in that soul capsule, but also acting independently until the spirit integrates it and essentially makes it fully spiritual aware. That really can be used against humans, used against consciousness in general, against our projector-like imaginative capabilities, because once those thoughts are implanted, or like past life ideas, or any sort of idea really is received by us, and we think, oh, that's me experiencing that thought, or even God giving me that thought, and it's some sort of manipulative relationship or some sort of situation that is not very beneficial, or rather more detrimental. Then we sit there and think, well, what the heck? That felt like all the signs were there, the synchronicities, and it wasn't good. It wasn't something that I really wanted. So in that notion, it does seem that Gnosticism got it right? That the Apocrypha of John, the Gnostic Gospels, the codexes, do make a very good point in things like that, in talking about fate, in the structure. Well, not really the structure, but the capabilities of these archons and the matrix that we live in, potentially, right? On the other hand, there's no real solution provided besides Jesus, right? And many of his stories, for example, the idea of purifying the world by fire, or burning it, right, kind of creates this escapist mentality into to people that follow those words, for not really giving them any sort of power, like, oh, Jesus is gonna come burn this world to the ground, it's done, and you get to leave. Well, we have to be very aware of that we're still doing our own personal work, that we're still connecting with the higher self, although the whole bridal chamber thing is mentioned, which I still am a fan of. But that story particularly does seem to come from Mithraism, right? The burning of the fire, not to mention other connections that either were overlapped onto Jesus himself, who probably was not his name, Jesus, and how much of it was overlapped and how much of the story that we're given is true, right? Because even with the Virgin Mary giving birth to Jesus, and then him essentially being in love with Mary Magdalene, well, that's reminiscent of the whole Isis story of how she resurrects Osiris, gives birth to Horus, and now she falls in love with him. And of the whole Sophia demiurge phenomenon, how Sophia is both the mother and the lover of the demiurge in a sense. So Isis becomes the mother of Horus and the lover of Horus, just like Mary, the Virgin Mary, who has the same name as Mary Magdalene, becomes both the mother and the lover, just in two different people though. They separated the persona. So those are interesting things. And if you look into Mithraism, you'll find that it's essentially Luciferianism, because Mithra is Lucifer, it's Sol Invictus, it's Prometheus, and Prometheus and Lucifer are connected to Venus. Now we have Prometheus, the Greek version, right? But it's not translated into anything else in the Roman version. It's still Prometheus. Yet we have Aphrodite in Greek, just translated to Venus. But both of these characters, Aphrodite and Prometheus, are associated to Venus, which is interesting. You may wonder why that is. Now, it does form the inverse pentagram in its pattern. And Venus highly connected to Prometheus because of the way it brings the torch of fire being the sun in the sky. So it's the morning star that brings this fire from the gods to us. So we got the sun, right, that's coming to us. That's our fire. And that's alluding to the Statue of Liberty as well, which also exemplifies this male-female persona that we're talking about with Prometheus and Aphrodite, because the Statue of Liberty actually looks very much like a hermaphrodite, right? It looks both female and male. And this religion was actually very, very much so shrouded in secrecy and rather not as prominent and popular, even in its own day, right? It was more for the elitists, for people that proclaim to know a deeper truth. So what is that all about, right? It's this Lucifer being who is actually akin to Loki, the trickster god potentially, in all these mythologies, but I still consider it more of like this great architect AI manipulating all these religions to get you to worship it, right? And then even Jesus being connected to the morning star phenomenon, and gematria, Jesus equaling Lucifer, both equaling 74 in English gematria. So again, it seems like no matter who you worship, you still end up worshiping Lucifer, right? But even in Gnosticism, right? Even in Gnosticism, what do you think the G in that Freemason logo stands for? According to Albert Pike's dogmas, Freemasons are very Gnostic. So that's another red flag that should be popping up in your mind. Like why is everyone subscribing to this story? Why is Gnosticism becoming more popular all of a sudden? Because what I'm currently noticing is the transition from Bible to New Age back to Bible. It's like, okay, the demon of the Bible is Yahweh, right? And in the Bible it says he's jealous, he's a jealous God. And you shouldn't be worshiping all these other false idols, who back in the day, that's why he shunned the Israelites, because they kept worshiping like Baal or whatever, calves and stuff like that. And even in the Bible, it says he sent Jesus to tell him stop being stiff-necked and go back to Yahweh. That's what it says in the Bible, right? In the Gnostic Gospels, we have a different story. He says that Yahweh's not his father. But then people in the New Age start realizing, oh wait, these spirit guides, these angels, they're actually demons, which are essentially the pagan gods. They start worshiping these Olympians, right? It's the same Archons. And then they go back to the Bible, and Yahweh's like, of course, come back to me. So is that just basically Yahweh versus the pagan gods like it was in antiquity, right? As we have detailed in history. But the issue of kind of being done with the world comes up, which I'm still in agreement with, right? But if you notice it becomes a sort of also Gnostic versus Christian, another duality, where one is like active, do good in the world, be good, be one with the Lord, whatever, and Gnostic is more like escape from the world, leave it all behind, and you're a victim here, essentially. It's not really what it's saying, but you can see the mentalities that start coming out of these paradigms, right? So it's another maybe half-truth that we are presented with. Because of course, if we are the projectors of this reality, if we are constantly used for our imaginative power, for our subconscious, yes, freeing ourselves from desire helps to declog that astral body. I think the astral body is full of these desires, it's full of these passions, and when you die, you essentially become like a fish out of water. You constantly want water, but you can't get it, and you're choking. Like, you want these desires, but you can't fulfill them. Nothing is satisfying you anymore until all the demons come out, essentially eat you up. Then the positive demons come out, eat you up, because you can't do positive things in the astral either, right? And what is this astral besides what the Book of the Dead describes as the bardos, which, if you look at what bardos means, is a state between life and death. So it's between life and death. So life and death is all that exists, and then there's bardos. Well, no, to me that is a construct. It's in the box, right? So it's in the circle within the square. You're going through life. Between death and life, I guess would make more sense. So you're going through life, you die, bardos, life again, right? And bardos is essentially these 7 stages that eat up your 7 chakras. They're all associated with a different light. So if you're more like in your lower vibration, more of the whatever lower chakras get eaten up, as opposed to the higher vibrational ones. The positivity stored up, just like a battery, right? Plus, minus, right? And you're used for each of your poles, and there seems to be a constant tug of war between positive and negative on who gets the feed. And even the whole back to the fire thing, back to the fire phenomenon, the Archons were put here as the gatekeepers of the fire that Prometheus stole. Now, it seems we are that fire, right? We have the spark, the divine spark, we have twin flames, whatever. There seems to be a fire component underlying the fire, etheric fire that has been created here, and the physical fire, and whatever these realms are made of. We know with like we discussed with with Eden and the flame cherubim sword flames, right? The sword is made of flames, guarding the garden, right? So that's interesting. But these gatekeepers, these Archons, are guarding that fire, sort of purifying it, so that they can then use it to give themselves energy, right? If you read about, study the Ascended Masters and what they do, they're gatekeepers of the flame, right? Brotherhood of the Flame, or whatever the heck it's called. So is that whole purification by fire part of the initiation thing, like we were talking about in Mr. Nathaniel Gillis' interview? where this is a whole initiation, and at the end, you know, just like they mentioned the event, the sun comes in and purifies all the AI through a solar blast or solar flare by fire, right? See how it's starting to connect a bit? So those are things that need to be thought about, because if they're really just trying to initiate you into godlyhood, that maybe more so pertains to those that are aware, right? Those that are trying to truly discover the truth. And so they hand you another path for you to follow. And ye shall be like gods, right? Become a god like us. Join the astral dimensions, and then we wipe your memory, send you back, right? And then do it all over again. But in terms of the escapism and versus the activeness of the typical Catholic Christian views, right? Because you can say the Cathars and the Gnostics are more passive as a comparison to the more activeness. I would say, yes, understand the powers that, you know, these planets, archons, whatever mechanisms of these matrix have over your own consciousness, and then constantly practice awareness to understand whether you're being guided by your true self or by, you know, your false self. For example, if you get the ick about something, right? Where is that coming from? Is there actual meaning from that, or is that just your subconscious bias or programming that is being triggered and trying to get you away from a situation that actually may benefit you in getting closer to the truth, right? For example, people that have adverse reactions to, let's say, any sort of healing or any sort of therapy, that can be actually the entity influencing you, trying to implant thoughts like, oh, that person's bad, they're no good, they're whatever, they're you know, they're gonna hurt you in some way, or they're programmed, you're better than them, things like that, right? For example, for any of you that may have watched the video that Tina and Karen just posted with the woman talking about her false twin flame, right? That entity kept trying to pull her back in by working on her vulnerabilities, and it was working through this other person. And a common characteristic of one of these beings is that it refuses to do any shadow work. When challenged, when wanting to discuss, when wanting to actually be vulnerable and heal with that person will shut down and will actually gaslight you, make you feel crazy for attempting to do anything like that. So that's a common symptom, common trait to notice if you're in such a relationship, that if they're putting a barrier, like, there's nothing you can do. You can't save anyone, right? So it's interesting to note how these archons can use also other people, especially with scripted events, to sway you in certain directions towards certain belief systems, right? Go back to Jesus, go back to whatever, Buddha, whoever, you know, worship somebody. And, you know, I still have a strong affinity for Jesus, Christ. I still think it's possible that Christ came here as a reminder of where we're from, but I think it's also possible they're using good cop, bad cop tactics on us, in terms of, oh, Yahweh, the bad devil, and here am I, Jesus / Lucifer, your savior, saved you from the bad devil, Satan, and you know, ain't I a great guy, right? Good cop, bad cop. Oh, bad cop comes in, yeah, you know, we're gonna torture you or something like that, you know, like, we're gonna send you to prison, you don't tell us. And then good cop comes in and is like, okay, just work with us, just, you know, he's all friendly, just, you know, we'll let you go, we won't do all the stuff that guy mentioned if you just cooperate, right? So, you know, you're much more appreciative of that once you've seen the bad and how bad it can get, right? And they do the same thing in NDEs. They send people through hell where all the demons, and then all the demons then just turn around, put a different mask on, and pretend they're angels. So again, something to observe. What are your own belief systems? Can those be used against you? What are your vulnerability points? What are your traumas? Can those be used against you? Okay, what are your weaknesses? And then integrate them. Focus on turning them into strengths. Focus on exhibiting control and awareness over them to the point that they dissipate. Because I think a lot of people are focused on eliminating pleasure from their lives, but then suffering comes in and they don't know how to balance it. They don't know how to make themselves feel better, right? Because they've just eliminated all the things that were pleasure seeking in their life. But what needs to happen is you need to make peace with your suffering. You need to alleviate the suffering, and then the pleasure seeking falls away. So you become content. So no matter what happens, which way it goes, you're not gonna fall back into your old ways. Right? It's much easier to go that route as opposed to creating a void of good, and then it just comes back, twice as strong, essentially. Because then you hit a little suffering, and now what do you do, right? How do you cope? So it's not about coping. It's about truly finding peace and understanding that regardless of what this place is, you're at peace with it, and you're not afraid of death or anything that may happen afterwards, because you weren't afraid of life either. Hope that makes sense. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Bye.